In this video, we are going to discuss a few questions on bonding and structure for IGCSE. Which row describes isotopes of the same element? So isotopes should have the same number of protons. So definitely not A and B. You can rule out because it's different. So it's either C or D. Number of neutrons should be different. So it has to be C. Which statement about copper, diamond and silicon for oxide is correct? Copper and silicon for oxide have similar electrical conductivity, which is clearly wrong because copper is a metal and silicon for oxide cannot conduct electricity. So that has to be wrong. In diamond, the carbon atoms are covalently bonded as flat sheets. It cannot be flat sheets because in diamond, covalent bonds are in a tetrahedral fashion. In silicon for oxide, the silicon and oxygen atoms are covalently bonded at flat sheets, again, which is similar to diamond, so it cannot be. So the right answer should be, the structure of copper includes a lattice of positive ions, because copper is a metal and it includes a lot of positive copper ions and sea of electrons. The structure of an atom is shown. Which element is the atom an isotope of? An isotope, so the only thing we look at is the proton number. So how many number of protons? 7. So it has to be nitrogen. No other option, because an atom's characteristics is based on its proton number, atomic number. All right. What is an isotope of E1531? So its proton number should be the same. That means it should be 15, and the only option is B. Which row describes the formation of single covalent bonds in methane? Atoms share a pair of electrons, which is right because it's a covalent bond, and definitely not C and D, so we can rule out them. Now both atoms gain a noble gas electronic structure. That's the first one, which is actually right because hydrogen gets 2 electrons and carbon gets 8. Both atoms have the same number of electrons in their outer shell. No, they don't have the same number. It's 2 and 8. So the answer has to be A. Which statement describes the structure of an ionic compound? It is a giant lattice of oppositely charged ions, which is actually correct. It is a giant lattice of positive ions in a sea of electrons, which is actually a metal. It is a giant molecule. We cannot use molecule for ionic compounds. It's a simple molecule. Again, we cannot use ionic compounds. We cannot refer ionic compounds as molecules. When propane burns in air, carbon dioxide and water are formed. So these are the equations. This is all about balancing equations. And that has to be C3H8 plus oxygen gives 3 CO2 and 4 H2O. So 4 oxygen and 3 times 2, 6 oxygen. That has to be 10 oxygen. So the right answer is D. Which statement about an ionic compound is not correct? We often miss out this point, right? So it's better to underline that. It conducts electricity when dissolved in water. It conducts electricity when dissolved in water, which is actually correct. So we are looking for something that's not correct, so not the answer. It has a high melting point due to strong attractive forces between ions, which is actually correct, so not the answer. It has a regular lattice of oppositely charged ions in a sea of electrons, which is actually metal, so it is incorrect, so which is the answer. The ionic bonds are formed between metallic and non-metallic elements, which is again a correct statement, but not the answer, because we are looking for an incorrect statement. All right. The number of protons, neutrons and electrons present in the atoms are shown. Which atoms are isotopes of the same element? So if they are same element, their proton number should be equal. So we are looking at R and S, and their number of neutrons should be different, which is the case, and it should be R and S. The answer is C. Calcium metal reacts with water to form a solution of calcium hydroxide and hydrogen gas. Which equation is correct? So it's again balancing equations. So a calcium metal plus H2O gives calcium hydroxide. We often miss out this 2 and go for the other option, but make sure you have that because calcium is 2 plus, it's a group 2 metal, so hydrogen, right? Now you have to have 2 oxygens, so it should be 2, and hydrogen should be 2 plus 2 4, 2 H2 is 4, so it has to be 2 H2O and just 1 H2, so it has to be 2 H2 and 1 H2. C is the answer. Which statement describes the structure of copper? It has a lattice of negative ions in a sea of electrons. Cannot be negative ions. It has the lattice of negative ions in a sea of protons. Again, no negative ions, and there is no sea of protons, so wrong. It has a lattice of positive ions in a sea of electrons, which is actually correct. It has a lattice of positive ions in a sea of protons. Impossible, right? Okay, so carbon has 3 isotopes. Why do all 3 isotopes have the same chemical properties? This is one common question, or one question that you will see in almost every IGCSE paper, something related to this, the chemical reactivity of isotopes. It's a very common question, right? So why do all 3 isotopes have the same chemical properties? They have the same atomic mass. Wrong. They all have the same number of electrons in their outer shell, and that is the correct answer. So the chemical reactivity actually depends on the same number of electrons in the outer shell, or same valency, you could say, or you could also say the same number of electrons involved in chemical reactions. They have all the same number of electron shells. That is actually wrong, because any element on 3rd period has 3 electron shells, on 4th period has 4 electron shells, so it's not the case. They all have the same number of nucleons. Nucleons are protons and neutrons, so that doesn't make any difference. Wrong. Silicon 4 oxide is a covalently bonded compound. Which statements are correct? Silicon atoms form 4 single bonds in silicon oxide, which is correct, which is like diamond, so it makes 4 bonds, it is tetrahedral. All right, so oxygen atoms form 2 double bonds. No, there are no double bonds in silicon 4 oxide. Silicon 4 oxide has a high melting point because it's a giant covalent compound, just like diamond. Silicon 4 oxide contains 1 silicon atom and 4 oxygen atoms, which is wrong, right? So the ones that's right, that's correct, are 1 and 3, so answer is B. Rubidium has 2 isotopes, 85 and 87. Which statement explains why both isotopes have the same chemical properties? Again, the similar question, so it has to be the number of outer shell electrons, right? They have the same number of outer shell electrons. Carbon 14 or 12 are isotopes of carbon. Which statement about these isotopes is correct? I think it's again a similar question. It's more reactive. It cannot be more reactive. Their reactivity should be similar. More reactive than the other, cannot be more reactive. Its reactivity should be similar again. The reaction of carbon 12 are similar to carbon 14 because they have the same number of outer shell electrons. Again, the same question. All right, it has to be incorrect. Solid X has a high boiling point. Its structure has positive ions surrounded by sea of electrons. So that's the clue, that's the hint. It has to be a metal. Which other properties does solid X have? So properties of metals, that's what they're asking. Brittle, an electrical conductor? No, it's not brittle. Metals are malleable. Brittle, no. Malleable, an electrical conductor? That could be right. Malleable and an insulator? No. Lithium reacts with fluorine to form the compound lithium fluoride. Which statement about this reaction is correct? Each fluorine atom gains 1 electron. That's correct. Each fluorine atom gains 2 or more electrons. Wrong. Each fluorine atom loses 1 electron. Wrong. Each fluorine atom loses, again wrong. That's the correct answer. The structure of an atom of an element X is shown. What is element X? So all that you have to do is to look at the number of protons. So atomic number is 5, so it has to be boron. The formulae of some ions are shown. These are some of the positive and negative ions. In which row is the formula not correct? Aluminum oxide is Al2O3, Al3 plus NO2 minus, which is correct. So our question is, which one is not correct? Yeah, iron 2 nitride, so Fe2 plus and N3 minus, which is incorrect. So if Fe is 2 plus and nitrogen is 3 minus, the compound that they make should be Fe3 and N2. This is the other way around, so that's the answer. This is incorrect. Sodium sulfate is Na2SO4, that's correct. Zinc nitrate is ZnNO3 twice, which is again correct. The molecular structure of hydrazine is shown. Which description of the bonding in hydrazine is not correct? Again, not correct. Each nitrogen atom has a non-bonding pair of electrons. How do we know that? How do we know that each nitrogen has a non-bonding pair of electrons? Look at the valency of nitrogen, which is 5, and look at how many bonds nitrogen has made. 1, 2, 3, right? So 3 electrons are shared, so 2 electrons are left unbonded, right? So it has a pair of unbonded electron or non-bonding electron. So which is a correct statement? We are looking for an incorrect statement. Each nitrogen atom has 4 bonding pairs of electrons, which is the incorrect statement, because as you can see clearly, each nitrogen atom has 3 bonding pairs around it, right? 1, 2 and 3. Let's read the rest of the options. Each nitrogen atom shares one of its electrons with the nitrogen atom. Each nitrogen atom shares one of its electrons with the nitrogen atom, which is again correct. We are looking for an incorrect answer. Each nitrogen atom shares 2 of its electrons with hydrogen, which is again correct. We are looking for an incorrect statement. Cesium is a metal in group 1 of the periodic table. Which description of bonding in cesium is correct? They did not ask in cesium compounds or compounds containing cesium, right? So in option cases we just go for it's a group 1 element, so it has to be ionic bonding, but it's in cesium metal, right? So it has to be metallic bonding. So electrostatic force of attraction between oppositely charged ions, which is ionic bond, so cannot be the answer, right? Electrostatic attraction between positive metal ions and mobile electrons, that could be the answer. That is the answer. Neighboring metal atoms sharing pair of electrons, which is not going to happen. Strong attractive forces between atoms, it's not going to happen. Why does magnesium oxide have a very high melting point? Right? Magnesium oxide is a metal and a non-metal, so it's an ionic compound. There is a very strong double bond. Now there is no double bond. There is a very strong attractive force between the magnesium oxide molecules. Molecules for ionic compounds? No. The oxide ions are strongly attracted to positive ions, which is actually correct, because in MgO you have got magnesium 2 plus and oxygen 2 minus ions. So these are called oxide ions. Oxide ions are strongly attracted to positive ions. That's the correct answer. The magnesium ions are strongly attracted to a sea of electrons. That is inside a magnesium metal, not between magnesium and oxide. Yeah. The diagram shows the electronic structure of a particle with a nucleon number of 40. So it has a nucleon number of 40. The table shows the suggestions that 3 students made to identify the particles. Which students are correct? So look at the number of electrons, all right? 2, 8, 8. So that is 18, right? 18 electrons. Argon has 18 electrons. Calcium 2 plus also has 18 electrons, right? And the mass of argon is 40, and the mass of calcium is also 40. So student 1 and 3 are correct. 1 and 3 are correct. Aluminum metal reacts with iron 3 oxide to form aluminum oxide and iron. Which chemical equation for the reaction between aluminum and iron 3 oxide is correct? So it is aluminum and iron 3 oxide, which is aluminum metal in all the cases. Iron 3 oxide is Fe2O3, right? Because Fe is 3 plus, they mentioned it's 3, and oxygen is 2 minus, right? So if you switch the valency, you get Fe2O3. So it has to be Fe2O3. You have two options, C or D, Fe2O3, Fe2O3, and aluminum. Then that forms aluminum oxide, which is Al2O3, which is correct, and Fe. So it has to be 2Fe. The answer is D, because 2Fe, 2Fe, 3 oxygen, 2 aluminum, 2 aluminum. But here it's not a balanced equation. The bonding, structure, and melting point of sodium chloride and sulfur dichloride are shown. So it has a very high melting point for sodium chloride, and sulfur dichloride has a very low melting point. All right, so whenever you get a question based on the melting point comparison, right, the only thing that we are looking at is the intermolecular forces and not the covalent bonds. It cannot be covalent bonds, it should be intermolecular forces like van der Waals forces or ID forces, or if in case of polar dipole forces, etc., or hydrogen bonding, etc. All right, so this cannot be the answer because it's talking about covalent bonds in sulfur chloride, so it should be intermolecular forces. The second one is talking about again covalent bonds in sulfur chloride, should be intermolecular forces. C, the attractive forces between molecules in sulfur dichloride are weaker than the attractive forces between molecules in sodium chloride. So they mention something, they refer something like molecule in sodium chloride. That is not the case. Sodium chloride is an ionic lattice, right? It doesn't have molecules, so that should be wrong. The attractive forces between molecules in sulfur dichloride are weaker than the ionic in sodium chloride. That is correct. Lead nitrate reacts with potassium iodide to form a yellow precipitate, potassium lead iodide, and a soluble salt, potassium nitrate. So it's about balancing equations. So we know that the first one, lead nitrate plus potassium iodide, clearly there is only one I, there are two I, wrong. The second one, 2 potassium, only 1 potassium, wrong. The third one, potassium is 2, here it is only, sorry, the lead is 2 here, the lead is only 1 here, wrong. Here lead is 1, iodine is 2, and nitrate is 2, and potassium is 2. So that's the right answer. A solution of iron sulfate reacts with aqueous sodium hydroxide to form a red-brown precipitate. What is the balanced equation including the state symbols for this reaction? All right, so they mention a solution of iron trisulfate. So it has to be aqueous. So we can rule out B, which is liquid, and D, which is again liquid, right? Now that's aqueous. Sodium hydroxide is of course aqueous, it's mentioned here, and it forms a precipitate. A precipitate is a solid. So in both cases it is a solid. So let's look at the balancing of this reaction. So here you could see that there are 2 Na, 1 Fe, 1 Fe, but 2 OH. SO4 is 1, here SO4 is also 1, but iron is +3, so FeOH should be FeOH thrice, because iron is +3, so we can rule out that one, which is correct here, right? So this should be the answer. Which statement explains why methane has a lower boiling point than water? Again, intermolecular forces, right? Methane has weaker covalent bonds, wrong. Methane has weaker attractive forces than water, right. Methane molecules are heavier, doesn't matter. Methane molecules have more bonds, no it's not. So that's the answer. Which row contains a description of metallic bonding and a property that is explained by reference to metallic bonding? Okay, so let's look at a property that is explained by reference to metallic bonding. A metal will react, no, the reaction is not about the metallic bonding. right? A piece of metal can be molded into different shapes. That is malleability, which is correct. A piece of metal can be molded, yeah, that's also correct. A metal will react, no. So we can rule out A and C, so it's either B or D. Now, description of metallic bonding is a lattice of negative ions. No, it's not. It's always positive ions. Metals make positive ions, right? So D is the answer. Molecules containing only non-metal atoms are covalently bonded. The formula of four covalently bonded molecules are given below. So we have got nitrogen, which has a triple bond. Carbon dioxide clearly has double bonds, right? Carbon dioxide clearly has double bonds. C2H4 is CH2 double bond CH2, it has double bonds. Methanol is just CH3OH, right? And only single bonds. So cannot be this and cannot be this. 2 and 3 should be the answer, right? The atomic number and nucleon number of a potassium atom are shown. How many protons, neutrons and electrons are in a potassium ion? So the details given is for atom. So we have a potassium ion, a positive charge, meaning it is 1 less electron. So there should be 18 electrons, 19 protons, right? And the number of neutrons should be 19. The difference between 19 and 39, which is 20, right? So the number of electrons should be 18, be 19, and number of neutrons should be 20. So this is the answer. The arrangement of the electrons in two ions formed from elements X and Y. So these are two ions, not elements, right? So it has 2H8. This is also 2H8, right? If it is 2H8 but it has a proton number 19, that means it lost one electron. So this is X plus 1. And this has 17 protons, meaning it gained one electron. So this should be Y minus 1. And X2 doesn't make sense because group 1 compounds are not diatomic. Y should be diatomic because it could be a halogen. So definitely not these two, right? It could be C or D, but we look at the charge. X minus doesn't make sense because it is 19 protons and 18 electrons, so it should be X plus. So this is the answer. Sodium reacts with chlorine to form sodium chloride. Which row describes the bonding in the three substances? Sodium is metallic bonding, so it's either C or D. Chlorine is covalent, so it has to be C. Sodium chloride is anionic, so it has to be C. Which row describes the structure of the positive ion in sodium chloride? So in sodium chloride, the positive ion is Na plus 1. That means it has 11 protons and 10 electrons. And 11 protons and 10 electrons, we have only one option, and that is B.